They told me I couldn't do it, and for a moment, I almost believed them. The words echoed in Monica Rivers' mind as she stepped into the boardroom, her heels clicking against the polished oak floor, the hum of the fluorescent lights bouncing off the glass walls. The room smelled faintly of coffee and expensive cologne, a sharp contrast to the knot of anxiety tightening in her chest. Around the table, a dozen men and women in tailored suits shuffled papers and adjusted their watches, their eyes flicking toward her like silent judges weighing her worth. Monica carried her laptop bag close, fingers gripping the leather strap as she scanned the sea of faces, each one expectant, skeptical, some even amused. She set her bag down, the click of the clasp echoing louder than expected, and pulled out her notes, her pulse quickening with every shallow breath. Richard Hayes, chairman of the board, leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, a faint smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth, and said, "Monica, we're all curious how you plan to turn this fantasy into profit." A few titters from the surrounding members followed, barely hidden behind coughs and shuffles. Monica swallowed, focusing on the rhythm of her own heartbeat, letting it anchor her in the moment. She began speaking, her voice steady, measured, weaving through the complex metrics and projections with practiced ease, her words painting a picture of growth and innovation. Susan Caldwell interjected, eyebrows raised, her tone clipped. "That sounds ambitious, but perhaps a bit unrealistic, don't you think?" Monica nodded slightly, acknowledging the comment without faltering, letting her eyes sweep the room and catch Gregory Foster's gaze, noting the slight twitch at the corner of his mouth. Her mind raced, cataloging each reaction, noting the tension in shoulders, the quick glance at the corner screen displaying quarterly profits, the subtle shift in posture that hinted at disbelief. She clicked to the next slide, the chart rising sharply, numbers highlighted in a way that drew attention to hidden revenue streams, yet she kept her explanation calm, her tone conversational. The board's laughter trickled in again, this time at the boldness of her approach, but Monica's jaw set firm. She imagined the ripple effect if her projections held true, the room suddenly aware of the stakes hidden beneath the numbers, and she leaned slightly forward, the lighting catching the glint of determination in her eyes. Every small movement counted, the placement of her hands, the steady cadence of her speech, the way she maintained eye contact with the most skeptical members. Time seemed to elongate with each second, the board's chatter fading into a distant murmur as Monica guided them through her vision, emphasizing strategy, potential, and insight they hadn't yet considered. She caught herself inhaling, the air thick with anticipation, then exhaled slowly, letting confidence mask the tension that still lingered in her muscles. For a fleeting moment, she allowed herself a glance around the room, noting the subtle shifts in expression, the faint lean forward, the tightening of lips, the slight furrow of brows that betrayed curiosity beneath skepticism. Monica paused at a pivotal point in her presentation, letting the data sink in, the room quiet except for the soft hum of projectors and the tapping of a pen on a notepad, creating a rhythm she could ride. The weight of expectation pressed down, yet it sharpened her focus. Each carefully chosen word a tool to pierce the veil of doubt, each glance a silent challenge. See me, see my value. And as she reached the final slide of the first segment, highlighting projections no one had yet dared calculate, Monica felt the first stirrings of a shift in the room, subtle but undeniable, as if the board had begun to notice that the woman standing before them was not to be underestimated, that behind her calm demeanor lay insight and authority capable of commanding respect and changing the game entirely. Monica felt the weight of the room shift slightly as she advanced through the data, her fingers brushing over the edge of the laptop, her eyes scanning every reaction in the boardroom. Richard Hayes leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, his expression unreadable, while Susan Caldwell tapped a pen against her notepad, each click echoing in the silent space between Monica's words. Gregory Foster crossed his arms, his gaze flicking to the charts then back to her, subtle tension running through the room, almost imperceptible but undeniably present. Monica paused, letting the statistics breathe, allowing the projections to settle in the minds of her listeners. Her voice remained calm, measured, each phrase chosen to guide attention to the overlooked opportunities hidden within the quarterly numbers. She emphasized the potential of untapped markets, the overlooked demographic trends, and the strategic advantages waiting to be realized, all while maintaining an effortless composure that belied the tight coil of adrenaline in her stomach. Her green eyes swept the table, noting the minute shifts in posture, the micro-expressions that revealed surprise, curiosity, and the faintest hint of doubt being replaced by recognition. She allowed a subtle smile, not of arrogance but of quiet confidence, to flicker, just enough to signal the understanding that she was aware of the underestimation she had encountered, yet remained unshaken. Monica referenced projections that had been quietly gathered over the last fiscal year, numbers that revealed hidden revenue streams and profit centers no one had considered, each figure presented with clarity, supported by graphs that visualized growth potential without overwhelming detail. The room seemed to hold its collective breath, each member caught between skepticism and the undeniable logic that Monica articulated, her cadence steady, her tone unwavering, commanding attention not by force but through clarity and insight. She moved seamlessly through the presentation, her gestures deliberate, drawing focus to the critical elements, while allowing moments of silence where the weight of the evidence spoke for itself. Monica's internal dialogue remained disciplined, a mental checklist ensuring that every point was delivered, every counterargument anticipated, every potential doubt addressed before it could take root. She could sense the subtle nods, the leaning forward, the eyes narrowing thoughtfully, and knew she had begun to penetrate the veil of resistance that had met her at the outset. Each carefully constructed sentence, each transition between data points, was designed to maintain engagement, to invite the board into her perspective, to allow them to see the rationale, the foresight, and the potential that she carried into the room. As she concluded this segment, Monica allowed a brief pause, letting the numbers linger, the implications settle, giving her audience a chance to process, to absorb, to begin questioning their initial assumptions. The quiet in the boardroom was not silence, but anticipation, a fragile balance waiting to tip, and Monica knew the next moment would define the remainder of the meeting. She straightened her shoulders, exhaled slowly, and prepared to introduce the next set of insights, the next layer of evidence that would not only validate her proposal, but begin to shift the perception of her capabilities, quietly asserting authority through intellect, poise, and unwavering professionalism, all while the subtle energy of change threaded through the room like an undercurrent, compelling attention, commanding respect, and setting the stage for the revelation that would soon redefine the conversation entirely. Monica Rivers took a slow breath, feeling the subtle shift in energy as the board leaned forward, the tension in their bodies a silent acknowledgement that her analysis was beginning to resonate. She clicked the remote, and a new slide illuminated the room, casting a soft glow that reflected off the glass walls and the polished surface of the table. The slide displayed charts comparing projected outcomes with previously overlooked variables, highlighting the hidden profit potential that had gone unnoticed by even the most experienced executives. She spoke with deliberate clarity, guiding their attention to each metric, explaining the reasoning behind the numbers and the long-term implications for the company, her voice smooth, unwavering, drawing them into the logic of her argument. Richard Hayes' brow furrowed slightly, his fingers drumming lightly on the table, a subconscious sign that her data had captured his focus. Monica's eyes swept over Susan Caldwell, noticing the faint lift of an eyebrow, the slight tilt of her head, subtle signs that curiosity had begun to replace initial skepticism. Gregory Foster, who had seemed entirely disengaged moments earlier, now leaned just a fraction forward, eyes narrowing in concentration, processing the information she presented. Monica maintained a calm, steady presence, her posture upright, shoulders back, projecting confidence while her internal senses cataloged every reaction, every micro-expression, every momentary hesitation, adjusting her pace and emphasis to ensure clarity and impact. She highlighted the efficiency gains and cost-saving measures embedded in her proposal, not as boastful claims, but as carefully articulated opportunities that reinforced her strategic vision. The room was silent except for the soft click of the projector and the quiet scribble of pens on notepads, the ambient sound giving weight to her words, accentuating the importance of each data point. Monica allowed brief pauses between points, letting the significance sink in, her eyes occasionally meeting those of the board members, acknowledging the unspoken recognition that she was delivering insights they had not anticipated. Her voice carried an underlying assurance, the kind that commands attention not through volume, but through precision, clarity, and a deep understanding of the subject matter. She noted subtle exchanges between board members, whispered observations, and fleeting glances that suggested a re-evaluation of their earlier assumptions. Monica introduced comparative scenarios, illustrating potential outcomes with tangible, relatable examples, making the abstract numbers concrete and understandable, reinforcing the credibility and foresight embedded in her strategy. She guided them through projections that incorporated variables no one had previously accounted for, connecting dots that were hidden in plain sight, demonstrating her comprehensive understanding and meticulous preparation. Each point was delivered with measured emphasis, her cadence deliberate, drawing attention to the critical aspects while allowing space for processing, creating a rhythm that engaged the board intellectually and emotionally. As she approached the concluding segment of her presentation, Monica observed the subtle changes in posture and expression, the micro shifts that indicated attention, curiosity, and the beginnings of respect. She maintained her composure, poised and confident, each word a precise tool to reshape perception, ensuring that by the end of this segment, the board would not only understand the potential of her proposal, but begin to recognize her authority, expertise, and the depth of insight she brought to the table. The atmosphere in the room was charged yet controlled, a delicate balance of anticipation and realization, as Monica prepared to transition seamlessly into the next phase, where the hidden profit projections would be revealed in their full magnitude, leaving the board unable to dismiss her perspective and fully acknowledging the value she had meticulously laid before them. Monica Rivers noticed a subtle change in the energy of the room as she transitioned to the next segment of her presentation, her fingers poised over the clicker, ready to reveal insights that had remained hidden until this moment. The boardroom, with its high ceilings and glass walls, reflected the soft overhead lights, creating an almost ethereal glow that made every movement and gesture feel magnified. She allowed herself a brief inhale, steadying her pulse as she prepared to introduce the hidden profit projections that would redefine the conversation. As the slide shifted, detailed charts and graphs appeared, highlighting revenue streams and efficiencies that had been overlooked in previous analyses, the numbers clearly showing potential gains that far exceeded initial expectations. Monica spoke deliberately, her voice steady and controlled, walking the board through each segment of data with precision, emphasizing the underlying logic and strategic rationale behind every figure. Richard Hayes shifted in his chair, leaning slightly forward, his fingers interlaced on the polished surface of the table, eyes fixed intently on the screen as he absorbed the information. Susan Caldwell's pen paused midair, a subtle lift of her brow betraying a dawning realization that perhaps her earlier judgment had been premature. Monica allowed a confident yet composed smile to form as she continued, articulating connections between operational efficiencies and market trends, the implications of each variable made tangible and accessible without overwhelming detail. Gregory Foster, who had appeared detached in the earlier segments, now followed her explanation with focused attention, his body language subtly opening, signaling an unspoken acknowledgement of the value she was presenting. Monica's green eyes swept the room, noting these shifts in posture and expression, mentally cataloging every micro-reaction, adjusting her pacing to maintain engagement while allowing moments for reflection. She emphasized the cumulative effect of the projections, connecting previously isolated data points to reveal a comprehensive picture of opportunity, highlighting growth potential with clarity and precision. The room remained silent except for the faint hum of the projector and the soft scratching of pens on paper, the quiet intensity creating a rhythm that underscored the significance of her revelations. Monica's tone was measured, each sentence delivered with calculated emphasis, commanding attention not through volume, but through the authority embedded in her expertise and preparation. She allowed brief pauses between points, letting the significance of the data settle in the minds of her audience, her presence calm, composed, yet undeniably compelling. Subtle glances exchanged among board members reflected an undercurrent of acknowledgement, the initial skepticism giving way to curiosity and cautious respect. Monica highlighted the long-term benefits and strategic advantages of the approach, connecting numbers to actionable insights, guiding the board through a narrative of potential that had remained unseen until now. Each slide, each data point, was presented with deliberate clarity, reinforcing her credibility while subtly shifting the perception of her authority within the room. The ambient lighting reflected off the charts, the polished wood of the table, and the attentive faces, amplifying the tension and focus as Monica led them through the evidence that had the power to alter their initial judgments. She concluded this segment with a deliberate pause, letting the full impact of the revelations resonate, her posture poised, eyes steady, as if silently inviting the board to absorb the depth of insight she had laid before them. The quiet hum of realization filled the space, and Monica could sense the room leaning in, the subtle acknowledgement that the information she had presented demanded a reevaluation, setting the stage for the next phase of the meeting where understanding and respect would solidify. Monica Rivers sensed the subtle shift in the atmosphere as she moved to the next portion of her presentation, her posture poised and unwavering, the confidence she had cultivated over years of preparation radiating in each measured gesture. The board members, previously brimming with skepticism, now leaned forward in their chairs, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and cautious respect, the quiet hum of the room punctuated only by the soft shuffle of papers and the low hum of the projector. Monica's green eyes scanned the table, noting each micro-expression, the slight lift of an eyebrow, the tentative nods, the unspoken acknowledgement that her perspective demanded attention. She clicked to the next slide, revealing a set of projections tied to operational efficiency and market expansion, each metric carefully highlighted to demonstrate potential gains that had been overlooked in previous assessments. Her voice remained calm, deliberate, and precise, guiding the board through complex analyses with clarity, each phrase structured to ensure comprehension without overwhelming them. Richard Hayes' fingers drummed lightly against the polished wood of the table, a subtle signal of engagement, while Susan Caldwell's eyes narrowed thoughtfully, her pen resting lightly on her notepad as she processed the implications of the data. Monica allowed a slight pause between points, letting the significance of each revelation settle, creating a rhythm that drew the board into the logic of her argument. She emphasized the connections between cost management, emerging market trends, and potential revenue streams, presenting the information not as a boast, but as a demonstration of careful research and strategic insight. Gregory Foster, who had been quietly observing, shifted slightly in his seat, the corner of his mouth twitching in recognition of the validity of her points, his body language signaling that the earlier dismissal was giving way to curiosity and engagement. Monica maintained a steady gaze, alternating focus between key members to reinforce the breadth of her message, ensuring that each person understood both the detail and the overarching strategy. She allowed her voice to carry subtle authority, calm yet compelling, emphasizing facts over opinion, insight over assertion, guiding the board toward the realization that the opportunities she had identified were both actionable and substantial. The ambient light reflected off the charts and polished surfaces, casting a soft glow that accentuated the tension and focus in the room, the quiet intensity amplifying the impact of her words. Monica's gestures were purposeful, drawing attention to critical points without distraction, her timing precise, allowing the audience to absorb, reflect, and connect the data with their own understanding of the company's potential. She carefully illustrated scenarios where the proposed strategies could yield significant results, backing each assertion with clear evidence, demonstrating not only the feasibility but the necessity of her approach. The boardroom was now fully engaged, the earlier resistance replaced by attentive processing, the subtle dynamics shifting in Monica's favor as she navigated each slide with composure and precision. Every pause, every inflection, every deliberate movement reinforced her credibility, her authority, and the depth of her preparation, creating a compelling narrative that was impossible to ignore. As she neared the conclusion of this segment, Monica allowed a brief, calculated silence, letting the weight of the revelations sink in, preparing the board for the next phase where the full extent of the hidden potential would be unveiled, securing their attention and establishing her position not only as a leader, but as a visionary capable of transforming assumptions into insight, quietly commanding respect and acknowledgement. Monica Rivers allowed herself a moment to absorb the subtle acknowledgement radiating from the board as she transitioned to the final portion of her presentation, her movements fluid, her posture poised, every gesture intentional and deliberate. The slides shifted, revealing detailed scenarios that illustrated the full scope of the hidden profit potential, each graph and chart designed to guide the audience's understanding, connecting abstract numbers to tangible outcomes. She spoke clearly, her voice calm yet authoritative, narrating the implications of each data point, highlighting efficiencies, untapped markets, and operational insights that painted a compelling picture of strategic advantage. Richard Hayes leaned forward, resting his chin lightly on his hand, his eyes tracing the trajectory of projected growth, the lines of the charts reflecting in the lenses of his glasses, his expression a mixture of surprise and contemplative interest. Susan Caldwell's fingers hovered above her notepad, her pen poised, caught in the tension between prior skepticism and the undeniable clarity of Monica's analysis. Gregory Foster shifted slightly, a subtle nod betraying that the information was reshaping his assessment, the earlier dismissal replaced by cautious respect and engagement. Monica's green eyes swept the room, noting each micro-expression, each shift in posture, and adjusting her cadence and emphasis to maintain connection and ensure comprehension. She highlighted key correlations between market expansion, consumer trends, and projected revenue, making the insights accessible while retaining the sophistication and depth of her strategy. The ambient lighting reflected softly on the polished table and the board members' attentive faces, emphasizing the quiet intensity of the moment. The room suspended in focus as Monica delivered her narrative with precision and clarity. Her gestures drew attention to critical points, subtle yet purposeful, reinforcing her authority and the validity of her argument, each movement a reinforcement of her confidence and mastery of the material. Monica allowed brief pauses, letting the significance of her conclusions settle in, giving the board the space to process the information and internalize the potential she was revealing. Her tone remained composed, persuasive through the strength of logic and insight, guiding them to see the hidden opportunities and the value embedded in her proposal, the calculations meticulous, the rationale indisputable. The soft hum of the projector and the quiet shuffle of papers created a rhythm that underlined the gravity of her presentation, accentuating each revelation, each connection she drew between seemingly isolated data points. Monica's presence was commanding yet approachable, authoritative without intimidation, creating an environment where attention and respect were earned through clarity and expertise rather than force. She concluded the segment with a deliberate, confident pause, her eyes meeting those of the board members, allowing the weight of the full analysis to resonate, each person in the room absorbing the depth and foresight she had meticulously laid before them. The room remained quiet, anticipation hanging in the air, a delicate tension that signaled the recognition of her authority and the power of the insights she had just revealed, setting the stage for the final discussion and the affirmation of her vision. As the board collectively began to reassess their earlier assumptions, their attention fully captured by the precision, intelligence, and strategic foresight that Monica Rivers had commanded throughout the presentation. Monica Rivers allowed the room a moment to settle after the revelations, sensing the subtle but undeniable shift in attention and energy, her green eyes scanning each board member for the first signs of recognition that their previous judgments had been incomplete. The soft hum of the projector and the faint scratching of pens on paper punctuated the space, emphasizing the gravity of the conclusions she had presented, while she stood with measured composure, every gesture deliberate and purposeful. Richard Hayes leaned back slightly, his fingers interlaced over the polished table, a contemplative furrow forming on his brow as he considered the implications of the figures, the previously hidden potential now impossible to ignore. Susan Caldwell lowered her pen, her lips pressed together in a quiet acknowledgement of the depth and accuracy of Monica's analysis, her posture relaxing as the tension that had defined her earlier skepticism dissipated. Gregory Foster shifted forward, hands resting lightly on the table, eyes narrowing in focus, registering the meticulous preparation, strategic insight, and clarity with which Monica had delivered each segment, signaling a gradual acceptance and respect that had not been present moments ago. Monica spoke again, her voice calm yet compelling, highlighting the interconnectedness of market opportunities, operational efficiencies, and financial impact, weaving the narrative of hidden potential into a coherent and persuasive framework. Her movements were subtle yet intentional, each hand gesture and shift in stance reinforcing her authority without overt assertion, allowing the strength of logic and insight to speak on her behalf. She paused strategically between points, permitting the board members to absorb and internalize the implications, creating a rhythm that guided understanding while maintaining engagement. The room, previously filled with quiet skepticism and restrained energy, now resonated with attention and contemplation, the micro-expressions of curiosity and acknowledgement becoming more pronounced with each elaboration of her conclusions. Monica emphasized the sustainable advantages of her proposed strategy, framing the insights not as theoretical possibilities, but as actionable and evidence-backed opportunities, demonstrating both foresight and practical comprehension of the business landscape. The lighting reflected softly off the glass and polished wood, accentuating the attentive faces and the subtle shift from doubt to recognition. The ambient atmosphere charged with anticipation as Monica conveyed the depth of her understanding. She maintained deliberate eye contact, ensuring that each board member received both the information and the unspoken communication of her confidence and competence. Each slide, each statistic, each carefully chosen word reinforced her authority, shaping perception without confrontation, guiding the board toward an appreciation of the analytical rigor and strategic foresight she had brought to the table. Monica concluded this phase with a brief, intentional pause, allowing the full weight of her insight and preparation to resonate across the room, the quiet acknowledgement, the subtle nods, and the thoughtful expressions marking the moment when skepticism began to give way to respect, understanding, and a readiness to engage with the vision she had so carefully articulated, setting the stage for the final integration of her proposal and the affirmation of her leadership. Monica Rivers took a measured breath, letting the full weight of her analysis resonate through the room, her green eyes sweeping over the board members who now sat leaning forward, a quiet acknowledgement in their expressions that the landscape of their understanding had shifted. She allowed a brief pause, letting the implications of the data sink in, the subtle hum of the projector and the soft shuffle of papers filling the space as each executive processed the scope of the hidden opportunities she had revealed. Richard Hayes' fingers tapped lightly against the table, a contemplative rhythm that mirrored his internal calculation, while Susan Caldwell's lips pressed together thoughtfully, her posture relaxed slightly as the realization of Monica's foresight began to take hold. Gregory Foster nodded imperceptibly, his gaze tracking the charts as he connected the dots that had been obscured until now, a flicker of respect crossing his features. Monica spoke again, her tone calm but compelling, articulating the strategic implications of the projections with precision, demonstrating not only the viability of her proposals, but the careful reasoning that had led her to these conclusions. Her hands moved subtly, guiding attention to critical points, emphasizing relationships between variables, and highlighting the cumulative impact of operational efficiencies and market trends, each gesture reinforcing the clarity of her argument without demanding overt recognition. The lighting reflected off the polished table and the glass walls, casting a soft glow over attentive faces, the quiet intensity amplifying the focus in the room as Monica navigated the final layers of her presentation. She maintained deliberate eye contact with key members, allowing the unspoken acknowledgement of her authority to be absorbed while continuing to guide the discussion toward actionable insights. Every word was chosen to reinforce credibility, every pause calculated to let the importance of the evidence settle, ensuring the audience could follow and internalize the strategic vision she had laid before them. Monica allowed the final slides to linger, illustrating long-term projections and potential outcomes with clarity, emphasizing both the depth and precision of her analysis. She spoke with measured cadence, the rhythm of her voice commanding attention not through volume, but through the weight of expertise and insight, creating a compelling narrative that bridged comprehension and respect. As she concluded this phase, the room held a charged stillness, the subtle shifts in posture, the faint nods, and the thoughtful expressions signaling that the board had not only understood but begun to appreciate the depth of her preparation, the rigor of her analysis, and the strategic foresight that positioned her not merely as a presenter but as a leader whose vision demanded consideration and acknowledgement. Monica's presence remained calm, authoritative, and precise, allowing the insights she had revealed to speak for themselves, creating an environment where understanding and respect had begun to replace skepticism, quietly setting the stage for the affirmation of her vision and the recognition of her leadership in the final moments of the meeting. Monica Rivers allowed herself a subtle exhale as the room absorbed the final projections, feeling the quiet shift of acknowledgement settle over the board, the tension of skepticism replaced by a measured respect that had been carefully earned through the clarity, precision, and foresight of her presentation. The soft glow from the projector illuminated the polished surfaces of the conference room, reflecting in the attentive eyes of Richard Hayes, Susan Caldwell, and Gregory Foster, each of them processing the full magnitude of the insights she had laid before them. Monica's green eyes scanned the room one last time, noting the slight nods, the thoughtful tilts of heads, and the deepening engagement that spoke to an unspoken recognition of her authority and expertise. She allowed her shoulders to relax slightly, maintaining poise, every gesture controlled, deliberate, signaling confidence without the need for overt assertion, her calm presence a subtle reinforcement of the competence she had demonstrated throughout the meeting. Her voice, steady and compelling, carried through the quiet, emphasizing the actionable steps that could be taken to implement the strategies she had outlined, connecting projections with real-world applications and tangible outcomes that transformed abstract numbers into meaningful business decisions. Richard Hayes leaned back in his chair, his fingers interlaced over the table, a faint lift of his brow acknowledging the depth of Monica's analysis, while Susan Caldwell's pen rested lightly on her notepad, the earlier skepticism replaced by attentive consideration, each small gesture signaling the shift in perception. Gregory Foster adjusted slightly in his seat, eyes tracking the final slides with deliberate focus, his posture open, reflecting a dawning understanding of the full scope and implications of her strategic recommendations. Monica guided the room through the last of the charts and projections, her explanations clear and concise, each point building upon the last to create a cohesive narrative that illustrated both the hidden potential and the sound rationale behind her approach. The ambient light reflected softly off the surfaces, highlighting attentive faces and the subtle dynamics of acknowledgement and engagement as the board members absorbed the full picture she had presented. She maintained deliberate eye contact, allowing the confidence and authority inherent in her knowledge to resonate without the need for emphasis, letting the data, insights, and strategic vision speak for themselves. Every pause was calculated, every inflection measured, allowing the weight of each conclusion to sink in, ensuring that each board member internalized not only the numbers but the strategic foresight and analytical rigor that had guided their interpretation. Monica observed subtle exchanges among the board, small gestures that confirmed a recalibration of understanding, a recognition that she had guided them from doubt to consideration, from skepticism to respect. Her presence remained composed, commanding through intellect and clarity, reinforcing the narrative of insight and authority she had woven throughout the meeting. As the final moments of the presentation concluded, the room retained a focused stillness, the subtle acknowledgement of her leadership, foresight, and strategic acumen fully established, leaving Monica with a quiet satisfaction as she prepared to transition from presenting data to allowing the board to deliberate. Their perception irrevocably aligned with the comprehensive and compelling vision she had meticulously constructed and delivered.